There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining. You couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful, all right? And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is.
Every best-selling novel, every edgy stage play that makes it to the big screen, if there's even a hint of controversy, it gets scrubbed, watered down, and sanitized. That's just how Hollywood works now. But Quentin Tarantino wasn't having it. In a fiery interview with the always unfiltered Bill Maher, Tarantino lit a match under modern Hollywood hypocrisy. He tore into his critics, calling them sanctimonious virtue signalers and woke phonies. Maher, never one to sit quietly, hit back with his signature sarcasm, keeping the tension crackling. It was raw, explosive, and completely unfiltered. A must-watch for anyone tired of the industry's safe, polished facades and desperate for something real.
Before we run out of time, I have to say to you, besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back when anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you. They tried it with the last one, with Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood, some bullshit about Margot Robbie doesn't have enough lines. And you do what I wish other people would do. Instead of apologizing like a little you say, I don't agree with your assessment.
Bill Maher has never minced words about his disdain for Hollywood's obsession with woke narratives. He's called out time and again how the industry has traded rich storytelling for shallow virtue signaling, replacing character arcs with trending hashtags. But amid the ideological fog clouding Tinseltown, a few voices still manage to cut through, and Quentin Tarantino is one of the sharpest. Even Maher, a relentless critic of Hollywood's groupthink, holds Tarantino in high esteem. Why? Because Tarantino is proudly, defiantly old school. He doesn't pander to trends, doesn't sermonize, and remains untouched by the wave of performative progressivism flooding the industry. His films aren't about comforting the audience. They're about challenging them. In an era where most creators play it safe and stick to the script, Tarantino throws the script out entirely. It's bold, it's refreshing, and it's exactly what a stagnant Hollywood desperately needs right now.
It has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining.
There's two kinds of movies, virtue signalers and superhero movies.
This is exactly why Bill Maher holds Quentin Tarantino in such high regard. He's one of the few voices on the left with the guts to call out the absurdities within his own camp. Tarantino doesn't tiptoe around uncomfortable truths, and Maher sees that kind of honesty as a rare and valuable trait in today's Hollywood. We've all witnessed the industry drift away from imagination and narrative depth, anchoring itself instead in rigid ideology and hollow virtue signaling. One of the most glaring examples? The disastrous Snow White reboot, a critical and commercial failure. Why? Because the creative team prioritized politics over plot. In a misguided attempt to appear progressive, they ditched the beloved Seven Dwarfs and replaced them with CGI creatures, ignoring the many little people actors who've long embraced and celebrated those iconic roles. It wasn't inclusive, it was condescending. And that's the kind of empty, performative pandering that both Tarantino and Maher refuse to quietly tolerate.
Are you bullish on the future of movies? Because
well, look, you have to always look at.
Are we going to get back to that place?
Look, this happened. This comes in waves. This absolutely comes in waves. All right, so it's like, okay, just looking at the 40s. All right, that was during the wartime, but that's also the time that you had film noir, where you actually, even though with the Hays Code, you had these dark, dark stories that were being told. But then after the war was won, then you had the 50s, which was the first of the completely homogenized decades, where you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful.
Let's pause for a moment, because Tarantino made a striking observation that deserves real attention. He brought up the Hays Code, the strict set of moral standards Hollywood adopted in the 1930s to censor anything deemed too provocative, especially when it came to sex and taboo subjects. At the time, critics saw it as a direct assault on free speech and a blatant attempt to sterilize creativity in favor of moral conformity. Here's the twist. Tarantino argues that censorship has made a comeback, but this time, it's not coming from government censors or conservative watchdogs. It's being enforced by digital mobs and social justice crusaders who weaponize cancel culture. Today's artists aren't worried about breaking laws. They're worried about breaking Twitter. Films are judged less on vision or craftsmanship, and more on whether they check the right ideological boxes. Directors hesitate, writers self-censor, and studios cave at outrage before the first frame is even shot. It's a new Hays Code, repackaged as progress, but every bit as stifling, controlling, and dangerous to true artistic freedom.
And then the 60s, pretty much from like 1960 to 1966, was the 50s part 2.
Right.
But then what we think of as the 60s starts in about 67, and that's when New Hollywood
Bonnie
comes
and
out.
Clyde.
Yeah. And that's an absolute positive response to the homogenized 50s.
So it's going to come back again.
Okay, and then it goes into the 70s, but then we went into the 80s.
All right.
And that's why you came up with politically incorrect, because that was the first. This is basically the 80s part 2. What we're living through right now.
Well, I'll just take one more go at it. There's going to be a new golden age. Please be there and part it.
Now here's something that really stands out. Tarantino believes Hollywood might finally be starting to purge itself of the woke culture that's gripped it for years. And if that's true, all I can say is, thank God, because this era of performative progressivism hasn't just worn thin, it's become suffocating. Too many recent films feel less like stories and more like sermons, drained of imagination and burdened by political checklists. Creativity has been sanitized, spontaneity stripped away. If Tarantino's right, and the tide is turning, then bring it on. A creative revival built on compelling characters, unforgettable storytelling, and real emotional stakes, rather than agenda-driven messaging, would be the reset Hollywood desperately needs. Imagine movies that move us, surprise us, and challenge us without scolding us. That's the kind of magic that made people fall in love with cinema in the first place. But during his sit-down with Joe Rogan, Tarantino also offered a troubling observation, one that adds a darker, more complex layer to this already heated conversation. Take a look.
And then there's like, okay, this guy or this woman is going to write a think piece in the New Yorker about my movie, or in the Los Angeles Times, or in the New York Times, and they're going to write some think piece about it, or on this website or that website, and they're going to go against it. And talk about, oh, this is a retrograde vision, or that this is a regressive vision, or Quentin has become right wing, and this movie has a right wing bent because of the way they, Quentin is identifying with Rick Dalton with hippies. He's that's how it's
Is that really a take that someone had, that you've become right wing because of a character in a film?
Even like a critic who liked it, A.O. Scott, goes, well, this whole vision seems more on the right than you would imagine.
It might sound extreme, but this kind of reaction happens far more often than you'd think. Many people, especially on the political left, tend to judge films through a rigid ideological lens. The moment they sense even a whiff of conservative themes or right-leaning values, the outrage machine kicks in. Suddenly, it's not just a movie, it's a perceived threat. Online attacks follow, targeting the production, the actors, the writers, anyone even remotely associated with the project, for daring to present viewpoints that don't align with their own. What often gets lost in the noise is a basic truth. Cinema isn't supposed to live inside an ideological echo chamber. Films are artistic reflections of society, its dreams, its contradictions, its raw, messy truths. They aren't meant to be sanitized mouthpieces for any single belief system. Not every film will mirror your values, and that's the point. Great art challenges us, provokes thought, and yes, sometimes even offends. But to dismiss a film solely because it doesn't pander to your politics is to completely misunderstand the purpose of art itself.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily make it wrong, make it bad, but it just seems like more on the right. Well, Rick is coming from a place more on the right, not me.
Yeah.
Per se, but I am telling the story through Rick's point of view. And then, they say something, well, how come they don't talk about, how come there aren't more black characters in the movie? How come they don't talk about the Vietnam War more? Well, basically, the movie takes place between 2 days. Okay, well, they didn't bump into Jim Brown, right, on those 2 days. All right, they saw who they saw during those 2 days. Well, they didn't have a conversation about Vietnam in those 2 days.
Exactly. It's long past time for social justice warriors and hypersensitive critics to grasp a simple truth. Not every movie is meant to preach. Some films exist purely for entertainment, escapism, and sheer enjoyment, and that's perfectly valid. Others tackle serious, even uncomfortable topics. Both types of films have a rightful place in cinema. Not every project needs to shoulder the weight of a moral crusade. What many people forget is that directors are, first and foremost, storytellers. Their vision doesn't always reflect their personal beliefs. It's often about exploring different perspectives, characters, and situations. When filmmakers are pressured to shoehorn social or political agendas into stories where they don't belong, it's not progress. It's artistic sabotage. Forcing a film to carry messaging that conflicts with its core narrative waters down its impact and strips it of emotional power. The greatest films don't resonate because they lecture. They endure because they connect with audiences through story, character, and truth. Authenticity matters. Let art breathe. Let filmmakers tell stories. Let art be art.
I think you're correct. And the thing about it, though, is, look, those kind of like academic college think pieces, they're just fine. Like in a college situation, they make sense. I can take a book or a movie and come up with some argument that goes, that's like that's more of a subtextual argument about a film. That doesn't mean I'm right, but it means I can make my little argument,
right?
For the course. But it doesn't. But I have no illusions that that's what the director was thinking about.
In the end, Tarantino's perspective is a breath of fresh air, a sharp reminder that true art isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about provoking thought, delivering entertainment, and capturing life in all its raw, messy, and often uncomfortable reality. He remains one of the few voices in Hollywood unwilling to bow to ideological pressure, earning admiration even from his harshest critics, including Bill Maher. Whether he's calling out the absurdities of woke culture or fiercely defending his creative independence, Tarantino champions a vital principle. Filmmakers must be free to tell their stories without fear of cancellation or cultural backlash. Not every film needs a political agenda, and not every director should be judged through a narrow ideological lens. Hollywood may finally be stirring from its long, performative slumber. If this truly signals a shift toward bold, unapologetic storytelling, then count me in. Art flourishes where free expression reigns, not where ideological purity tests dictate the boundaries of creativity. If Tarantino is right, and Hollywood is waking up from its woke coma, we may be on the cusp of a real cinematic revival. No more lectures, no more forced messaging, just gripping stories, unforgettable characters, and honest emotion. That's the Hollywood we crave. If you're done with the noise and ready for the real talk, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.